Then we're going to take a look at the demand forecast for the next 3 months through November here for fall 2014. Take a quick look at the generation expectations and changes to the supply stack coming up in the next 3 months. We're going to follow that up with transmission and congestion analysis, taking a look at the top 5 constraints that we like in the next 3 months. And then lastly, taking a look at some implemented and upcoming market changes.
for this past summer. So that's for the day ahead. There is the traditional Monticello to east wind MAC congestion, which is mostly just driven by the strong wind in the central and some line outages around Lafayette. So this line is actually on outage, and but we used to see this a lot during the summer. So that kind of summarized the summer for the day ahead congestion. And moving into the next slide, we can look at the real time. This is ranked by the average shadow prices per hour, but since the real-time constraint hit 5 on a 5-minute interval, we also did that, just looking over all the 5-minute interval and then just did the calculation for the on-peak days. So looking at the past summer, one of the other top constraints that we got was also the Ottumwa congestion. This is really similar to the constraint that we see in the day ahead. You can see that Knoxville congestion was also ranked as one of the top constraints in the past summer in the real time as well. Both are due to outages around Burlington and generation strength around Ottumwa unit. The other one that we also got was the Monticello to east of the MAC. Came in different forms, but it's mostly due to generation, wind strength around central zone area, around Fowler especially. So that's one of the other key ones. We also saw the Greenwood transformer again in the real time. So the reason was, I mentioned earlier, was just due to the strong demand, higher load in Mississippi, and whenever the temps hit above 90 degrees in the summer, there is a tendency for us to see that binding into the real time. So basically, just to summarize what I went over for the real time and the day ahead, comparing that with last summer, there is less congestion that we saw over the on-peak days. And overall shadow prices per hour is also a little bit lower than last summer.
All right, thank you, Stanley. I'm now going to hand it over to Pat Higgins, who will be taking us through the fall 2014 demand outlook.
All right, so just starting off with a quick graphic detailing historical degree days and September to November daily peak demand from 2012 to 2013. As you can see, the cooling degree days taper off by late September in north and central. We use Minneapolis for north and Detroit and Indianapolis as proxies for those regions. And so those degree days taper off by late September as these regions transition from heating to cooling load. As you can see, cooling degree days in the south taper off by early November. We use New Orleans as the proxy for that. And as you can imagine, the overall demand kind of sticks in between those. So it steadily decreases until reaching a minimum around late November or late October, early November. And then heating load starts to drive demand back upward. As far as our fall forecast goes, we're not really seeing any strong deviations from average for September to November. The greatest risk of cool anomalies is in the southern portions of north, and we have the biggest risk of warm anomalies in the southern portions of south. And we made this forecast using analog years for weak or neutral El Nino. El Nino has really been struggling to develop over the past month. We expected to see something by now, so there will be a little bit of a warm risk to the forecast if it doesn't develop. The dynamic models have been showing pretty warm risk pretty much throughout the whole footprint. So, but there are already some indications in the middle of October that we'll get a pretty significant cold shot, so we're still pretty comfortable with this forecast. As I said, there's still a 60–65% chance of El Nino developing, and already we've had a cool September. It's been 2 to 4 degrees below average for most of North and Central. So we're just expecting it to get a little bit warmer in October and November to close out the fall.
All right, thank you, Pat. Now we're going to take a look at generation expectations and changes to supply stack coming up in the next couple months. So first off, just looking at the historical wind, as we all kind of know looking at MISO, the shoulder seasons do tend to be much gustier, and therefore you do see a little bit more in terms of percentage of overall wind output based on that installed capacity. So for the fall season, you're looking at about a 30% capacity factor in the west, and expecting to see that increase to just under 50% on average by the end of the season. Now looking at Central Zone, you are about 20% of average output right now, and again, getting to just under that 50% capacity factor, although you are seeing that trend up a little bit faster than the overall slope on that west line. Next up, just taking a look at how those RSG capacity units have been run over the past couple seasons here. Looking year over year, RSG usage looks more frequent in terms of times and 5-minute intervals that it's been used. However, it does look like MISO has been using much less when they are calling it upon it. So we are seeing a decrease in megawatt value despite the increase in usage. Looking at the summer, we did see RSG usage dip year over year. That's probably more a result of the weaker overall loads that we saw develop this past season. Now taking a look at some upcoming potential retirements, right now under dispute is the Presque Isle Power Plant in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. What we're seeing there is a coal-fired power plant. Total capacity is about 300 megawatts or so, currently owned by We Energies, and they've attempted to retire it mostly due to some customer defections and kind of increased competition there. What we're seeing with MISO, however, is MISO really kind of preventing that unit from coming offline and citing reliability concerns in a very kind of generation-constrained area. So what we're looking at right now is the potential to see that offset by increased transmission capacity, moving power into the Upper Peninsula. But again, that might be a little bit, a couple years down the line here before that plant actually retires. In terms of new generation coming online, I don't think it's a huge surprise to see mostly wind generation, totaling about 350 megawatts coming online over the course of October. We are looking at an increase in wind around Mower County in Minnesota, where we already kind of see a pretty thick cluster for October 1st, and that's right around that Pleasant Valley Station area in northern Iowa. You're also seeing an increase of about 150 megawatts of output around Rolette County in North Dakota, expecting to see that connect to the Rugby area, where we already see a significant amount of congestion. And that currently is scheduled to be energized for the end of October. So with generation behind us, I'm going to pass over to Dennis to walk us through transmission and congestion for fall 2014.
Thanks, Lauren. I'll just kind of walk through what we call our top 5 constraints, which are constraints that we think are, will be prevalent throughout this month, October and November. So we'll start the list off here with breed to wheatland. This is a constraint near the Illinois-Indiana border. It tends to have a bullish effect on Indy Hub for people trading cash on ice. One of the big drivers is this line outage on the 345 kV system at Eugene to Bunsenville. It started earlier this month and is going to run until Thanksgiving, so pretty much our entire study period here. And additionally, there's this constant pull of power from Illinois into Indiana that drives that congestion. The next constraint, Harmony to Lansing. This is in the DPC area of the footprint. So we have a couple transmission outages that make this a bit dicey of an area here. The first one is this Florida Turkey River line that's supposed to be out here for about a year until next September. And additionally, there's a line outage at Alma to Wabaco that goes on through March. With those lines out, it really reduces the amount of transmission available for DPC to pull power into that region from Iowa and Minnesota. And we tend to see some congestion in the Lansing area. The next one, this is in the south, Addis to Tiger. This may be familiar in that it is one of the most frequently occurring constraints that we have seen in the real time so far this month. This is down in the Baton Rouge area. The main driver is a long-term line outage at Willow Glen to Brittany. Started back in August and won't be resolved until Halloween. So September, October, we expect to continue to see this congestion in Louisiana. And finally, we have South Prairie to South Chalmers. This is in Indiana near the city of Lafayette, which is the part of the state which there's a lot of wind generation nearby. As Lauren noted, we expect central zone wind generation to increase as we head through September into October and November. And additionally, we have a long-term line outage at East Winamac to Monticello, started back in July and will continue past the new year. So with the increasing wind generation in that line outage, we see some congestion risks in that part of the footprint.
All right, thank you, Dennis. So to start to wind down our presentation here, we're going to take a quick look at some of the upcoming market changes that we're seeing underway in MISO. First, what we're looking at is the change in the hurdle rate. This goes back to the MISO South border issue with the ability to flow between MISO South and MISO Central and North. So again, getting back to that issue, we moved from ORCA earlier this year into the sub-regional power balance constraint, and this is another additional piece to that puzzle. So back on July 16th, MISO submitted a filing to FERC to implement a hurdle rate to kind of curb excess flows of 1,000 megawatts between MISO Classic and MISO South. This hurdle rate totals about $9.57 per megawatt hour based on what MISO is expecting to be charged by SPP after that letter was sent back in March. Essentially what this does is replace previous demand curves for both ORCA and sub-regional power balance and really kind of escalates violating that 1,000 megawatt ORCA agreement. Right now, the provision does allow for monthly updating of the hurdle rate based on kind of a true-up process depending on those charges assessed by SPP. The next issue we're seeing in MISO coming up on the radar here is the implementation of ELMP. Extended location marginal pricing was expected to move into the MISO market as of 10/1. MISO has actually now petitioned FERC to extend that deadline, and now we're looking at an implementation date of 12/31 of this year. What ELMP does is give MISO the ability to dispatch units under economic minimum levels, as well as gives offline fast start units the ability to set price in kind of two extreme instances. First is the reserve scarcity issue, if it's a reliability issue for the network. And the second is in the instance of any extreme transmission constraint violations, where MISO would be unable to solve congestion without that unit being called upon. What this is trying to do is incorporate some of the startup costs for MISO, and it's also an attempt to reduce some of that RSG usage that we noted earlier in the presentation. What I'm going to kind of wrap up on is something that is on the horizon and will probably impact a lot of us. It definitely will impact us here at Genscape, but were some proposed changes to the day-ahead market for MISO. Essentially what MISO did was flip the idea of moving up the day-ahead market close to 9 a.m., which would essentially better coordinate with the gas day. What that would give MISO is an earlier day-ahead clear, moving it up 2 hours earlier to essentially help with the gas nomination process. Currently, it's very early stages, and we don't see any dates for implementation currently issued by MISO. And essentially, the big driver here is an attempt to comply with some FERC orders to really kind of get electricity coordination with interstate natural gas line pipeline scheduling. And really, the impetus here was some of the polar vortex issues that we saw earlier this year. Additionally, under this change, not only would the MISO be moving up the day-ahead market close, but they would also start following daylight saving time, similar to other markets. Currently, MISO does not shift and take that into account, but that would make this change to help line up with everything. So again, a couple of major changes here coming up in MISO. This one especially is something that we're going to be watching closely here at Genscape. That was all we had prepared here for today. Again, thank you for taking the time to listen in on this webinar. We will be making the slides in a a copy of this available to all of the subscribers here. So thank you again. We're going to take a quick look at some of the questions that have come in, and we'll be right back. All right, our first question here was about fall 2014 and how it was shaping up. We noted that you're looking at some below normal potential temperatures for MISO Central. I think on a lot of people's minds is that polar vortex, and one of the questions was, are we looking at a polar vortex starting to line up here for 2015? So
well, I definitely don't think that this winter is going to be as bad as this past winter was. Especially if El Nino does develop. El Nino tends to be warmer than average for around the Great Lakes, around basically the central region. So as long as El Nino develops, I don't think there's very much risk of much colder than average winter like we saw last year. But again, there's always the possibility of an isolated event coming in, say, January or February, and I'm sure we'll consider that when we get together and make our winter forecasts in October.
Perfect. Thank you, Pat. Another question we have is if we've heard anything regarding a virtual spread product in MISO. Initially, we had heard something for year 2015 in terms of creating that virtual spread product. However, it does look that might have fallen to the wayside with some of the other changes that MISO is looking to implement. Our next question is back to the wind being added to the interconnect. What we're seeing there was increases of wind production in two of the more kind of wind-driven areas of the footprint. So kind of taking a look at the congestion that we were expecting to see. With the South Dakota builds, what we were seeing there was an increase in some of the South Dakota area congestion. Again, we mentioned Rugby as being one of the more popular constraints in that area. With the Pleasant Valley addition, what we were seeing there was an increase in some of the Adams area congestion, especially that Adams transformer that we've been seeing more recently in the day ahead. So there is potential to see that congestion continue. The next question kind of harkens back to that last slide that we were just talking about. With the MISO day ahead changes, our product will be adapting as needed based on the changes that MISO is looking to make. So we've already started those discussions internally to make sure that we're hitting those target times for anyone putting in virtual transactions or submitting schedules to MISO. But I think that is all the time we have here for today. Again, if you have any questions, please feel free to hit us up on those emails you see on the screen here or by phone. You can also contact us via IM on MISO Genscape, nice and easy to remember. Again, thank you for taking the time this afternoon to listen to our webinar, and we look forward to seeing you on the next one. Take care.